Hi, welcome to our space show with Shoulders
Arayalım
and Balmiken. So let's start.
Sol is the sun. Ancient Romans who once worshipped the sun called it Sol, and it becomes a kind of official scientific names for the sun, which is pretty toasty if you ask me. And as for its size, the sun is so huge. But the sun size isn't what makes it seem so big and bright to us on Earth. It's because it's so close to us that it seems way bigger and brighter than other stars. So, the sun is hot and bright, and it heats light and both kinds of energy that we get from the sun. And let's take a look at a model to see how the sun energy gets from goods or soul to our planet.
You and I can see and feel that energy as sunlight. Without the heat and light we get from the sun, Earth will be just a frozen ball, floating around in space, which will be a total bummer. So thanks Sol, you're a real star, so the sun is big and really big, but understanding the universe is sometimes about perspectives. The sun is big to us. Sure, but it's nothing compared to the galaxy or even some of the other stars. And compared to the universe, well, our sun is pretty tiny compared to the universe because the universe is huge. Here's the sun energy is created in its super hot 15 million degree core. That energy then travels outward from the core to the surface of the sun. But this journey from the center of the sun so its surface can take over 100,000 years to complete. But once the energy deep inside the sun finally gets to the surface, it travels as light and heat all the way to Earth. In fact, it only takes about 8 minutes for light to travel approximately 150 million kilometers through space to Earth. Over here, that's not such a long time. So to sum up, energy is created in the sun's core. It travels very slowly to the sun's surface before it takes a super speedy trip to Earth in the form of light and heat.
The universe is big, really big, bigger than that. No, you are not thinking big enough. It is so massive that it makes my brain hurt. It is so ginormous, sweet, teeny tiny. Humans can just barely get our brains to comprehend it. But just because we can't really fully understand how big the universe is doesn't mean it's not important. The universe is our home. We should at least poke around. So how big is the universe? Let's start with our cosmic address. That is where we live in the universe. You could say my current cosmic address is the Crash Course Kids Studio, Toronto, Canada, North America, Earth, the solar system, the Milky Way galaxy, the observable universe, the universe. Knowing our cosmic address helps us understand where the things in the sky are. Things like stars, asteroids, planets, and even other galaxies. Every time we go up and out a level in our cosmic address, the actual space we are talking about gets more spacious. Distances in space are so large that scientists had to come up with a whole new way of measuring them. You can talk about space using miles or kilometers. The numbers get so big that they just sound like nonsense. That's where light year comes. It sounds like a measure of time because it has the word year in it, but it is really a measure of distance. Light is the fastest thing we know in the whole universe, clocking in at hopping 300,000 kilometers per second. In 1 second, light can travel around the Earth. The whole Earth. Have been times it's moving so fast our brains can detect that it's moving at all. So light year is the distance that light can travel in 1 year. Does your head hurt yet? Well, buckle up because we are just getting started. Back to our big question. How big is this universe of ours? Nobody knows, really. That is pretty weird, right? Well, that's partly because the only part of the universe we know about. What we call our observable universe, the parts that we can actually see or observe in any direction. Some things are so far away that light from those objects haven't even reached us yet. That is the limit of our observable universe. Beyond that, we don't know what is out there. But even sticking to the observable universe, we are going to need to scale things way down to understand any of it. Let's try to visualize our cosmic address on a scale that we can handle. Let's use this room as our scale. It's about 10 meters by 10 meters, the size of an average classroom. If the sun were the size of this room, the Earth would be about this big. Okay, not too crazy. Now imagine our whole solar system were the size of this room. This would be the sun. Don't see anything. That's because it's just a grain of salt. A grain of salt. Yeah, that is our sun. And the Earth's orbit around the sun would be about the size of this. At this scale, the Earth is just a microscopic bacterium. We can't even see it. At this size, our whole big huge solar system is just a grain of salt. Now, what if the entire Milky Way galaxy were the size of this room? Our solar neighborhood would be this big, oh boy. Now for finally the biggest thing we know, the observable universe. Imagine the observable universe is this room. Can you spot the Milky Way? No, it's just a way. Too small, it's not that, it's just unseeable. It's smaller than microscopic. The whole Milky Way. Are you dizzy? I am dizzy. So that gives you an idea of the size of the thing in the universe. But what about the size of the space? You know that the sun is the closest star to the Earth. But what is the second closest? That would be Proxima Centauri. It's 4.24 light years away. That means it takes light from that star 4 years to reach us. By comparison, it takes the sun's like 8 minutes to get to Earth. If you want to visit the sun's closest star, friend traveling in the fastest object humans have ever built, it would take 19,000 years to get there. That's only 4.24 light years away. The observable universe is, are you ready for this? 93 billion light years across, even using light years. It is so big, it still sounds kind of like nonsense. So space, it is big, really big. But it's also our home. Even if we are just unbelievably small little things floating on a speck of dust in a teeny tiny galaxy, we are still here and we know where we are in the universe, and that's pretty awesome. But I think I need to go lie down now. Okay, now that we have a little prescriptive, let's start looking a little deeper into the stars. Stars aren't all like our sun. Actually, they are all really different, from white dwarfs to red supergiant. Stars have all kinds of appearances and personalities.
There is a reason we zoom through megagiants, unbelievably huge vastness of space. It helps us understand how big universe really is, and not just how big it appears from our perspective down here on our itty-bitty Earth. If you glance up at the night sky stars, it seems like they all like the same plane and the same distance on Earth. And the stars are pretty similar, but don't let your eyes fool. And some stars are relatively close, just 4 or so light years away, and some hundreds of thousands light years away. About stars and billions of lights, billions people, and the big huge space, hands of space. There is a lot of our galaxy, the Milky Way, like the range of stars. And let's take a look what are different kinds of stars.
He is one of the most recognizable constellations, and he's got 2 body parts that are made from totally different kinds of stars. And remember Betelgeuse? We talked about this star in a previous episode. It's the right shoulders, and some people like me call it the armpits of Orion. And let me introduce you to Rigel Orions. Left foot and Betelgeuse and Rigel are both in our home galaxy. The Milky Way. Take a look at this picture of Orions based on the evidence, and that you can see which would you argue is hotter. Does one star look kind of reddish and another kind of blue? You smarty pants. And I bet you already guessed the answer. Betelgeuse, the armpit star, is a red supergiant, and it's much cooler than Rigel, and sadly it's nearing the end of its starry life. On the other hand, or foot, Rigel is a blue-white supergiant star. This star is in the prime of its life, burning super hot and super bright, but stick around a few million years, and Rigel will probably start to look like Betelgeuse, red and cool now. Since Rigel shines more brightly, you might, and that it's closer to us, and that would be a great guess. But using brightness to judge distance can be tricky. Rigel has much better true brightness than Betelgeuse, so the foot outshines the armpits. A constellation is a cluster of stars in the sky that have been grouped together in a pattern or shape and have been given a name. But before we take a closer look at constellations, let's review what a star is. And remember, a star is a bright object in space that gives off light through energy that it makes, and its core, the sun, is the most famous star to us. Earthlings, we've already talked about a few other well-known stars, through like bright Betelgeuse. And many of people use bright stars like Betelgeuse as markers in the sky to help find other less bright objects in space. For example, if you are looking for a dim star like Sirius B, you might have to look for a long time to spot it among the many other stars in the sky. But if you are able to spot a much brighter star like Sirius A, and you know that Sirius B is located to the lower left of Sirius A, then it will be much easier to find Sirius B. And like I said, there are so many stars in the sky that trying to spot just one can be tough, especially if it's not near a bright one like Betelgeuse or Sirius A. That's where constellations come in, and many of people use constellations to help them better map the night sky. Think of stars like cities on a map. In constellations, like countries, finding a large shape in the sky made of many stars is a lot a lot easier to spot than trying to find one single speck. Plus, there are only 88 named constellations, which is a much more reasonable number to deal with than a billion, and most of the 88 recognized constellations came from the ancient Greeks. The stars in a constellation are not related in any particular way. They just form a shape that the Greeks used to tell stories about their gods. And creatures like flying horses and giant scorpions, we know what the constellation is. Why don't we get to know some of the most famous ones?
Seeing this dragon-like shape in the night sky for a long time, constellations aren't just named after creatures, though some are named after mythical people, particularly gods and goddesses, one of the more well-known Greek gods. You know, the sky hires at the beginning of the year January. The constellation of Sagittarius is highly visible to us on Earth. The Greeks called Sagittarius the Archer because it looked like a guy shooting a bow, and Arrow Capricornus is also highly visible in January. Towards the end of the month, it is sometimes called the sea goat since it happens to have the head of a goat and the tail of a fish, which is not something you see every day. Next up in February is Aquarius, or the water bearer, or a group of ancient people called the Babylonians thought that this group of stars looked like an old man pouring water from a pitcher. Moving on to March, this is Pisces, or the fishes. Pisces represents Venus, a Roman goddess who is said to have turned into a fish and jumped into a river to escape an evil monster Ares. Is up on in April. In Greek mythology, Air was a ram with wings. The constellation of Taurus visible in May. Looks like, but it's named for the Roman god Jupiter, who could supposedly turn himself into a bull when he swam. John's prominent constellation Gemini is sometimes called the Twins because it reminds the ancient Greeks of the twin sons of Zeus. Cancer, which you can see pretty well in July, is called the Crab because that's what it reminded some folks of. August constellation is called Leo and look like a fierce lion seen in September. Virgo is called the Maiden since it looked like a lady holding grain, which symbolized the harvest to the Greeks and the Romans. This constellation of Libra appears in October, when days and nights are roughly equal and is considered a symbol of balance. I bet you. Can you guess what Scorpius is named for? It looks like a scorpion finishing off the year in late November. Is of the Eucus, which was once called Serpent Aries because it looked like a man holding a serpent or a snake. So now you know what a star is, and that a cluster of stars in the sky that are grouped together in a particular pattern is called a constellation. Besides having really cool shapes and stories behind their names, constellations help astronomers and us map the night sky since space is so huge and massive and enormous. Our map is far from complete, so anything that helps us navigate that vast space of space is okay. Harry Potter fans will recognize the name of our first constellation. Its name means dragon in Latin and also happens to be the name of Harry's biggest nemesis, Will's second biggest after Volley, who must not be named, of course. It is Draco. According to legend, Draco was a dragon killed by the goddess Minerva and was tossed into the sky. Draco is one of the 48 constellations described way back in the 2nd century by Egyptian astronomer Ptolemy. People have been seeing this dragon. You know, the sky hires at the beginning of the year January. The constellation of Sagittarius is highly visible to us on Earth. The Greeks called Sagittarius the Archer because it looked like a guy shooting a bow, and Aero Capricornus is also highly visible in January. Towards the end of the month, it is sometimes called the sea goat since it happens to have the head of a goat and the tail of a fish, which is not something you see every day. Next up in February is Aquarius, or the water bearer, or a group of ancient people called the Babylonians thought that this group of stars looked like an old man pouring water from a pitcher. Moving on to March, this is Pisces, or the fishes. Pisces represents Venus, a Roman goddess who is said to have turned into a fish and jumped into a river to escape an evil monster Ares. Is up on in April. In Greek mythology, Air was a ram with wings. The constellation of Taurus visible in May. Looks like, but it's named for the Roman god Jupiter, who could supposedly turn himself into a bull when he swam. John's prominent constellation Gemini is sometimes called the twins because it reminds the ancient Greeks of the twin sons of Zeus. Cancer, which you can see pretty well in July, is called the crab because that's what it reminded some folks of. August constellation is called Leo and look like a fierce lion seen in September. Virgo is called the maiden since it looked like a lady holding grain, which symbolized the harvest to the Greeks and the Romans. This constellation of Libra appears in October when days and nights are roughly equal and is considered a symbol of balance. I bet you. Can you guess what Scorpius is named for? It looks like a scorpion finishing off the year in late November. Is of the Yuccas, which was once called Serpent Aries because it looked like a man holding a serpent or a snake.
So, the zodiac is not just a random bunch of stars. It is a group of constellations that form a circular pattern in the night sky. And now you know which constellations are part of this pattern, and that people have been observing these constellations. For centuries, the zodiac has helped astronomers figure out how other objects travel in space. Objects like the sun and even our own planet. So constellations are super important for many reasons. We use them as markers to help us find our direction on Earth, but also to help us find other stars. It's neat, but now let's pull this all together and see how the sun affects and when we see the zodiac constellations, which is something.
I've still got my eye on the sky, particularly those 13 constellations in the zodiac that we learned about earlier. We found out that the zodiac constellations follow a circular path around our planet. Today we are going to learn more about where our sun falls in this path, and I'll give you a hint. It involves something called ecliptic. And so what is the ecliptic before we head into space to find out? It's time for a quick crash course. On astronomy, you know what a constellation is: a cluster of stars in the sky that are grouped together in a particular pattern and have been given a name. Some of the constellations we visited so far include Pegasus and Draco, and last time we met a group of constellations that form something called the zodiac 13, constellations that have been studied in track since ancient times. The constellations in the zodiac are all highly visible from Earth during different months of the year, starting with January and ending with Opticus, and last time we saw how these constellations form a sort of belt-like shape around the Earth. Well, this time we are going to see what the sun's up to while the constellation.
Okay, so there is Earth in the middle of space looking good home planet, and here are the zodiac constellations that surround Earth. But we've got to make room for another major player in space. You remember the sun, of course. Earth scooch over, sun hit the center stage you're on. Okay, you already know that. Earth rotates on its axis, making complete turn in one day. While it's rotating, it also revolves around the sun, making one full trip around the star every year. This movement of the Earth also makes it seem as if the sun is moving so.